Good evening. This is Maestro Cortella with a DoW2 Retribution Elite Modcast. Today we have a 1v1 on Ashes of Typhon. Our first player right here is Dark Riku, playing as the Eldar Warlock. And his opponent is Sir Topi, playing as the Techmarine. So the Warlock is he's kind of like an offensive spellcaster or a tanky melee hero. Depends how you what warriors you get. And the Techmarine repairs. He has a bunch of different guns. He can get an axe later on. He can heal and not heal. He can repair and support vehicles. A little out of my routine. Starting to get a little busy again lately, and did things a little bit differently with some of the last few casts I did. Now, this was actually another game from the July monthly Rumble. Definitely one of the games that was not quite as much on people's radar, both because nobody did a cast of this game. Nobody live streamed this game, even though there were 3 different live streams going on for the tournament. And additionally, I guess nobody really knows much about Sir Topi, but he's apparently pretty good. I don't know much myself, but this turned out to be a pretty good game. So we have actually Dark Riku playing as the Warlock. And that might seem unusual, but every player who entered into the July monthly Rumble had to select 3 heroes, only 3 heroes, which, like, I kind of find that a little strange. I'm not sure why they do that, but 3 heroes. Riku's were the Apothecary, of course, the Lictor Alpha, and the Warlock. So in this case, he chose to actually switch to the Warlock. I think this was game 2 of the set between Sir Topi and Dark Riku. And this is a matchup that is often considered in favor of Eldar, pretty much all around, regardless of commander. It's something I personally believe, and it's definitely something that Riku personally believes as a Space Marine player. Generally, one of the strengths that Space Marines usually have in 1v1 is map control, but Eldar is definitely also a race that is very strong on map control, and arguably probably stronger than Space Marines overall. They're also, Eldar, if the Eldar player gets Rangers, they're also very, very good at neutralizing scouts, which is where Space Marines get their map control. It's also where they get their counter for the Howling Banshees in the form of those shotguns. These scouts are just slightly overextended, really in a bad position, and that shotgun blast was the right idea. If they had just straight up retreated through the Banshees, they probably would have died there, and even then, they were a little slow on getting that retreat. Now, of course, one of the things that's tough about Eldar, pretty much regardless of who's playing against them, are the Howling Banshees. Just very widely known as an incredibly lethal unit. Certainly, especially when you're new to the game and you don't know better, those Banshees are probably going to troll you so many times. Losing, like, entire attack squads, entire Assault Space Marine squads or the equivalent for other races, is definitely one of the, almost like a rite of passage of playing this game. Just something that happens that you eventually learn just how incredibly dangerous Howling Banshees are. So for the Space Marines, obviously your main interest to that is the shotguns. And we see that Sir Topi has already gotten double shotgun scouts. Now, many Space Marine players will try to forego the shotgun scouts until they absolutely really need it. Some people will get the shotgun scouts pretty early just to counter whatever melee unit is coming out of whatever your opponent has. But specifically against Eldar, because of how lethal those Howling Banshees are in Tier 1, a lot of players will very quickly get counters to them. I mean, as we see, Sir Topi's, so far, all of Sir Topi's power investments have been something that are going to help him counter the Howling Banshees. He's got double shotgun scouts. He's also got bionics on the Techmarine, which gives him just basically a 360, I believe it's 360, disruption attack around himself. And even against a lot of other races, like whether it's Orc or Tyranids, you might more commonly see a Space Marine player try to make do with just 1 shotgun scout. But in this case, we really see that Sir Topi has gone for 2, obviously. Now, and of course, that might even be why Riku has decided to make a Ranger squad his fourth unit. And there are certainly a lot of different choices that Eldar players can make. Very commonly, it's actually a lot of Eldar players will often start with that starting Dire Avenger, get the Howling Banshees, and then they'll usually get a Shuriken as their 3rd unit, maybe a Ranger as their 4th, or another Shuriken as their 4th. So Riku has chosen to get out that 2nd Dire Avenger. That's going to give him a lot of mobile firepower, going to give him better map control, and less reliance on static emplacements or static units.
Our forces shall have tools for their task.
And then for the Ranger is generally a very good purchase against Space Marines, even though a lot of Space Marine players actually, or a lot of Eldar players, may not always get it. They may actually just go for the double Shurikens, or even just a single Shuriken on top of, say, what Riku already has right now. But that Ranger is just very good for bleeding Space Marines. Probably that Ranger shot is, in general, probably more cost-effective against Scouts than against any other unit in the game, since it's still guaranteed to one-shot Scout models, except for the Scout Sergeant, which might be why Sir Topi is going for a Scout Sergeant. And just the cost of Scout models to reinforce Scout models compared to all other units, all other squads that have their models one-shotted by Rangers, I believe it's higher than just any other, except for maybe these Eldar models, but I don't even think that's the case. Howling Banshees, actually, they would cost more than Howling Banshees.
Caution has its place as well. We trust in your guidance. Ever alert.
So the Rangers also kind of put Space Marines in a position where they kind of have to press forward and attack and be aggressive. Codex, who is just obviously a very good player, he often says that Rangers, it's often necessary to get Assault Space Marines to counter Rangers. Now that's interesting because Techmarine players often will not go for Assault Space Marines, which is kind of strange considering how good Assault Space Marines are overall, how good they are in just about any matchup, and how much tougher they can make things for your opponent. Probably the reason he chose not to do that is to rush to Tier 2 and get this Razorback, which is definitely one of the... It's something you can actually do with Space Marines regardless of commander, but in general, it's... With the Techmarine, you want to make vehicle plays. That's really a big part of how you capitalize on basically on the Techmarine's strengths. And I mean, you can go for a more standard build, getting those Assault Space Marines, having a slightly, or having a normal length Tier 1 as opposed to the short Tier 1 that Sir Topi has gone for. And it can still certainly work with the Techmarine, but this is something that really plays more to the Techmarine's strengths as a hero who can repair vehicles himself, as well as having as many as two squads of shotgun scouts that can repair their Razorback. So the Razorback is generally a pretty good rushable vehicle. Usually requires some kind of heavier AV, something more than just like a single source of AV to really get it, to really destroy it and get it off the field. It's especially a good purchase because of the fact that Riku chose to get a Dire Avenger and a squad of Rangers instead of a Shuriken Cannon. Riku would be in a much better position if he could just upgrade a Shuriken Cannon that he already has to help deal with that Razorback. As it is, like, a lot of the sources of AV that he can get might not be quite as effective. The Howling Banshees by themselves really can't take out a properly supported Razorback. Even if you combine it with something like a Haywire Grenade, you'll probably have something like Shotgun Scouts jumping out of the Razorback and then shotgunning the Howling Banshees so that they can get the Howling Banshees off them. So Grenade, Riku not paying attention, loses some Howling Banshee models. A little surprising to see that from Riku, especially considering most of his army was here, just had the attention with his Wraithguard. Now he's gotten Wraithguard, and this is an interesting choice. I think this is actually, in some ways it is a very good choice, precisely because of the fact that Sir Topi has chosen not to get Assault Space Marines. These Wraithguard, they are actually very, very good, and they're good for quite a few reasons. First of all, because Sir Topi has chosen not to get Assault Space Marines, and also as a way of dealing with this turret. For dealing with that turret, Wraithguard actually do not get suppressed, so they can actually just stand up under the fire of that turret and just straight up shoot it and kill it. Now, additionally, although Wraith Guard have trouble hitting moving vehicles, the Wraith Guard are so tough that you can't really just afford to have the Razorback stand really, drive around really close to the Wraith Guard, because if you drop your micro for a second, that you could lose the Razorback right then and there. The Wraith Guard pretty much really need to be tied up. And with the build that Sir Topi has gone for, he's gone for a build that does not really give him a lot of easy ability to tie things up, because he's going to have to wade through the range fire of 2 Dire Avengers. He also has to worry about a kinetic pulse coming from the Rangers that could stop any units that try to tie things up. So the Wraith Guard is just a good unit choice for actually capitalizing and punishing the fact that Sir Topi has chosen not to get Assault Space Marines. And of course, the Razorback, that was initially a good choice for punishing the fact that Riku chose not to get any Guardian Weapons teams in his initial Tier 1 lineup. So, kind of a good answer by Sir Topi. And now Sir Topi has gone for a Dreadnought. So I don't know, like, I'm guessing maybe he does main the Techmarine, because so far what he's doing with the Techmarine seems good to me. Of course, if he does play the Techmarine, if anything, he probably knows better than I do. Since I'm mostly going based on theory, I do not play the Techmarine that much myself, or much at all, to be exact. But he's definitely capitalizing on the Techmarine strengths by going for vehicle-centric plays. And the Techmarine can be very strong in Tier 2 in that sense. In fact, you have players like Toylali who actually play the Techmarine and not even go to Tier 3. He will stay in Tier 2, get vehicles, and then if he's running in excess of red, he'll use the Orbs of the Omnissiah Global, or rather the Blessing of the Omnissiah Global, to support his vehicles with on-the-field repairs, even if he doesn't have any repair unit around. That's one of the great things about the Techmarine. It works particularly well with the Dreadnought, and better with the Dreadnought than it does with the Razorback. And I think one of the things that works about this is that Eldar is definitely, they are a race with tricky AV. Their AV is not quite as clear-cut as, say, maybe Space Marines. And I think their AV is, even though they definitely have some very good options, I think their options are more narrow and more often force Eldar into very specific purchases. Things like specifically getting Guardian Weapons teams with Bright Lances and having to put Bright Lances on them, as well as getting Warp Spiders, since Warp Spiders are pretty much the only snare that Eldar has, as well aside from the Eldritch Storm, which is in Tier 3 and not always practical, and usually only practical for taking out one very durable vehicle, such as maybe a Dreadnought or a Predator, or more ideally some kind of Land Raider. But Sir Topi has done very well with this Razorback. It's particularly good against the infantry races because of how much more easily it can harass units like Dire Avengers, or even, especially Rangers, as well as the Howling Banshees. Also synergizes well with a shotgun scout play, but Sir Topi has actually lost one of his shotgun scouts. I haven't seen that. And Sir Topi is actually already into Tier 3 and getting yet another vehicle. Now, unfortunately, he's going to be suffering a little bit by not having that shotgun scout. Those shotgun scouts repair units in general. One of the reasons to get multiple of a starting squad is if you plan to make vehicle-heavy plays. That's part of what Sir Topi is doing. Now, at least as the Techmarine, he's not going to suffer as much if you went for this vehicle play and you were playing a hero like the Apothecary or the Force Commander. Since, again, he still has that Blessing of the Omnissiah Global that he can always use. He can still repair from the Techmarine. And the Razorback here maybe in a little bit of trouble, but, I mean, he's microed it very well, getting a Razorback to level 2, which I think is not very common. The Razorback certainly, I mean, it does decent damage. It's about as much as a attack squad with a Sergeant. but it's still usually a vehicle with a limited lifespan, and we probably won't see this Razorback last to the end of the game, but it's already lasted quite a long time, longer than most Razorbacks, and even among very good players, I think this Razorback has lasted beyond its expected lifespan. But Sir Topi is also, he's generally seemed to have been out-teching Riku, teching faster, certainly going for lighter builds as well. Although actually I believe Riku only got the Wraith Guard in Tier 2. I think that was the only unit he got, compared to the 2 Tier 2 units that Sir Topi got. But Sir Topi also beat Riku to Tier 3 to Tier 1 by quite a bit. Now Riku has gone for a Fire Prism, and that's probably a very good choice, but it's at a lot of risk now, being chased down by this Dreadnought. Now this Dreadnought, it looks like Riku, or Sir Topi rather, is not going to chance trying to kill the Fire Prism and failing, since that's definitely a possibility. But I think Riku's he's definitely in a tough situation now, he's chosen to get a Fire Prism rather than, say, a Warp Spider squad. So that means he has to fight off 3 vehicles, hope to destroy 1 or 2 of them, or obviously ideally all of them, when he doesn't have anything to use as a snare. And he's going with a Fire Prism, which does certainly function as AV, but as a source of AV, it's really, I'd say, medium DPS at best. Its advantages are range, and the fact with its mobility it can generally keep itself safe, but it's not a high damage. It's not really a high damage source of AV. Now the Predator out DPSs the Fire Prism considerably, as well as being a tougher vehicle. So generally one of the ways you can deal with a Fire Prism is generally rushing with a Predator. And if your opponent doesn't have a snare, such as in this case where Riku does not have a squad of Warp Spiders, it could potentially be a dead Fire Prism if Sir Topi can be very, very aggressive with his Predator. He's also being very aggressive with a Dreadnought. So in general, it seems like he's making a push for this Fire Prism. And what Sir Topi should do, he's going to lose I think he's going to lose the Razorback. Maybe. Ideally, Sir Topi actually should be using Sir Topi should be using Force Melee with the Dreadnought on the Wraith Guard, and then he should have been pushing forward with the Predator. If anything, the Razorback should have been pulled back, because there wasn't actually that much for the Razorback to do there, aside from maybe harass the Howling Banshees. But I think just a little drop of micro by Sir Topi. And, I'm, of course, talking about the ideal situation, and most players have a lot of knowledge about the game, but sometimes even if you have a lot of knowledge about the game, your ability to execute everything that you know in like the 5 to 10 second time span of an engagement and actually do things ideally, that's not how things may actually happen. Certainly not me, where I have knowledge that's well in disproportion to my ability to actually micro and execute things. But I mean, even for very, very good players, there are certainly times when something will happen and they'll do something where they definitely know better, but just with the way things went in the engagement, micro, hesitation, nerves, they might not necessarily do it that way. So here's an Eldritch Storm, and that's actually going to be the end of that Predator. So there, Riku actually using the snaring capabilities of the Eldritch Storm to actually take out that Predator. And I mean, that was in many ways a called shot. If you react very, very quickly to that Eldritch Storm, you should at least be able to, if you react quickly enough, you should be able to get the Predator out there without taking a single hit. Now, of course, as long as Riku got a single hit on that Predator right there, he was going to snare it. As it is, he got multiple hits on the Predator, and that actually will 100% snare it. Looks like the Fire Prism will go down, was caught a little overextended. Now it's being chased after by the Dreadnought, but the Dreadnought's certainly still at risk, but unfortunately Riku just walking into the edge of the map, walking with his hovering Fire Prism. So things have changed quite a bit now with as many as 3 vehicles lost between both players. And vehicles in general, it's with the way this game works, there are a lot of times when you might be seeing people play, and you might have someone who is playing against someone who is a better player than them, but they'll appear to be holding their own for like Tier 1, the start of the game, But then things can really go south for the less experienced player once they actually get into Tier 2 and especially Tier 3. And part of what happens there is that the stakes get higher. And vehicles are one of the big ways that stakes get higher, because vehicles have the potential to do so much more than a lot of squads, especially in Tier 2. But they're also risky in the sense that they can't retreat, they can get snared, and they're usually bigger upfront investments by quite a bit. Of course, they also have the property of being lower maintenance, since although they're bigger upfront investments, you don't have to reinforce them as long as you can keep them alive.
We are losing a victory objective.
And Sir Topi has actually lost quite a few units, and Riku is very low on VPs. Sir Topi has definitely made some nice plays on the use of his vehicles, basically. Got Dark Age of technology to really increase the survivability of his Dreadnought. And Dreadnoughts are something where they are incredibly powerful, and they are incredibly powerful, and they can be valuable into Tier 3, but sometimes it can actually be difficult to keep a Dreadnought alive in Tier 3 because you're starting to get more AV, and Dreadnoughts are tough, but one of their disadvantages is that they are low on mobility, so their ability to escape is not very high compared to many other vehicles. So especially in Tier 3, when you're getting out much more powerful sources of AV, especially tanks, which, as a general rule, beat walkers because of the fact that they are more maneuverable, can weave in and out, as well as generally being superior as ranged AV, depending on your Dreadnought. And this could be a dead Dreadnought right here if Riku decides to pursue a bit with that Fire Prism. Now, Riku is in Tier 3 as Eldar. Eldar have a lot of comeback mechanisms, and one of those big comeback mechanisms is this Fire Prism. Especially with the situation that Sir Topi is in, where right now he doesn't have a whole lot of units. Because the Fire Prism, since it has long range, it can outrange pretty much every single unit that Sir Topi has, and then the knockback, the disruption, can be used to prevent a capture. So it's like once you have this Fire Prism out, you often need to get rid of it or at least scare it off if you actually want to capture a point. Because once it starts shooting, you pretty much can't capture a point. Like right here, there's not going to be any way this Techmarine is going to be able to capture the point. I believe he does get knockback immunity from his energy shield, but he's not going to last with the damage that he's taking as well. The D cannon from Eldar is also another Eldar comeback mechanism. First, because it functions as victory point denial. It stops captures at times when you really need to hold points and your opponent really needs to take them. And what both the D cannon and the Fire Prism have in common in that sense is that they have extremely long range, so they really force your opponent to attack rather than capture. So both very good as a comeback mechanism, as well as also very good for sealing the deal when you're in a winning situation and your opponent really needs to cap in order to just stay in the game. Because even if your opponent can fight you when they have, even if your opponent has a comparable army and can fight you, they're going to be losing time by having to chase after a Fire Prism. And this is definitely something that is very much an Eldar advantage. And technically, Chaos and Space Marines can do it as well with Blastmaster Noise Marines and Plasma Cannon Devastators, but they don't do it quite as good, or quite as well, since they're using artillery that, first of all, it's set-up artillery, generally more easily forced off and more easily disrupted and tied up. It can be tied up, unlike a Fire Prism, as well as being less maneuverable. Now Sir Topi has a Land Raider Redeemer, which I think is actually, that's potentially, now there are actually a lot of problems with that choice, I think. First of all, Sir Topi is already taking a lot of damage. He's at 75% health now, because he's just driving his Land Raider Redeemer right into the Wraith Guard. The Land Raider cannot really fight other vehicles per se. But the thing is, right now, it's just taking too much damage. One of the main advantages of the Land Raider is that it has such a high health pool, and as we saw Land Raider go down right there, do absolutely nothing, was completely isolated, and just got destroyed by those vehicles. Now, first of all, the Fire Prism can shoot at the Land Raider from well outside the range of that multi-melta, which is the only source of AV on the Land Raider. And then those Wraith Guard were able to just tank a lot of the damage coming out of the Land Raider. And Wraith Guard are one of the highest sources of AV DPS that Eldar has. To be honest, one of the highest sources of AV DPS in the game. So they're very good for capitalizing on, or actually not capitalizing on, but exploiting one of the weaknesses. No. They're actually good at negating one of the strengths that the Land Raider has, which is just that it's a vehicle with 2,500 hit points. They're going to DPS right through that. Certainly better than other things will. They do quite a bit more damage than a Bright Lance, quite a bit more damage than a Fire Prism. So obviously quite a wasted Land Raider. And Sir Topi floating a lot of resources again. He might be going for, I don't know. But I mean, what Sir Topi probably should go for. Now, maybe Assault Space Marines. Certainly, that's probably the answer I think a lot of people would say, because the Assault Space Marines can jump forward, use the Melta to snare one of the Fire Prisms, and that's one of the best chances you have for taking out the Fire Prisms. And there probably is some truth to that, although well-microed Fire Prisms are extremely difficult to deal with, even for Assault Space Marines jumping forward with the Melta, since the Fire Prisms actually do straight-up outrange the Assault Space Marine jump, and then they can just disrupt the Assault Space Marines even on landing, but it's still just part of the options that you have. Now, Sir Topi has ultimately gotten this Dreadnought, which I think is actually not one of the better choices he could have made. With the resources he was saving up and floating, I think actually getting those Assault Space Marines in combination with another Predator probably could have been a better choice, since this Venerable Dreadnought is already taking shots. Again, well outside. It's like not even getting close to the Fire Prisms, and just taking so many shots. Now, on Riku's end, he needs to be careful about these Tactical Marines with their missile launcher. He's kind of just letting them go right behind, and unfortunately, Riku is just straight up dropping his micro. He's taking punches from the Dreadnought, which should not happen. And he does at least start disrupting the Tactical Marines and get them to force off, but like the Dreadnought really should not get anywhere close. Now on Riku's side of things, as long as Sir Topi is going for all these vehicles, Riku might want to consider getting some Warp Spiders. The Warp Spiders, again, they're the only reliable snare that you have as Eldar, because the only other snare they have is the Eldritch Storm. Now Riku almost does have enough for another Eldritch Storm, and he might use that, but then even with an Eldritch Storm, there's always the chance that you could miss outright with an Eldritch Storm. Not as much against the Dreadnoughts, maybe, but still, not a reliable snare. It's a huge commitment, and you really need to be able to follow it up. And it can certainly be very good, especially against something like a Land Raider, but you shouldn't rely on a nuke, pretty much ever. Like if it can do something really nice for you, great. But if you're relying on a nuke, you're basically just gambling, and you are gambling in a way that could win you the game, and you are also gambling in a way that could do nothing for you and costing you 500 red. But Riku is definitely playing things well. Again, just holding the VPs, denying the VPs, and with double Fire Prisms, as long as he can position them in a way that Sir Topi really should not be able to capture 2 VPs, and that's what Sir Topi needs right now. At best, he's really going to be able to get 1 VP until he takes out the Fire Prisms. I mean, as of now, Riku is actually stalling out right in front of Sir Topi's base, and he's actually just sitting on the VPs. Sir Topi, meanwhile, sitting on his vehicles because he hasn't gotten them repaired to full. And he's getting another... unfortunately, I don't think that was the good use of that Eldritch Storm. Probably going for a wipe on the Tactile Marines. Comes very close, and that's bleeding Sir Topi to hell. And Sir Topi is not going to have his Tactile Marines on the field with 3 models anytime soon. He's going to need to wait a little bit to get that 4th model. Actually, no, I'm just kidding. I'm wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. But he's got these 3 vehicles on the field. Now, the Predator, I think, was the choice that should have come earlier, before the Venerable Dreadnought. The Venerable Dread, I mean, unfortunately, I think that's kind of the decision that's made when you're not making the right choice. You're not even really looking at like, what do you need? You're just kind of going for something very powerful because you want something very powerful because you're desperate for something to put you back in the game. But again, unfortunately, I don't think that Venerable Dreadnought was what Sir Topi needed, and I think that's going to cost him the game. It's coming down to just a few VPs left. He will be able to capture this VP over here, but he still hasn't even been able to get that middle VP. So this is probably going to be GG in favor of Riku. And Riku actually now floating quite massively. So Riku obviously was losing for most of the game, and now he's coming back, about to win the game. Not even going to get the capture off on... Sir Topi's not even going to get the capture off on his natural VP, I think. Well, these tacks are still capping. Alright, so that is the end of this game. This was sent to me by Sir Topi. Again, it was a match from the July monthly Rumble. Was not live casted by anyone, so you couldn't even see it if you went to any of the channels that we had live casted. Those were Codex, Blessed Spartan, and Uncle Milty. This is probably the second to last 2.1 match that I will upload. I'm actually starting to get a little busier again lately. Since I'm starting to work more, as well as going to be starting school soon. So I may be uploading less. I might still be uploading, since I can often just start uploads as I'm leaving and then just let it upload while I'm taking care of business. But basically just no guarantee that I will be uploading as frequently as I was during much of the summer. In any case, hope you enjoyed the cast. Have a good night.